Hi, this is Bronwyn the Brave, and I'm demonstrating the stem stitch sewn bind off. This is my Quixotic Cowl, and when I was designing this, I knew that I wanted to have the 2-color long tail cast on, but I was struggling to find the bind off that I wanted. I wanted something that matched nicely. So what did I do? I went to my trusty Cast On Bind Off book, Cast On Bind Off 211 Ways to Begin and End Your Knitting by Cap Cease. This is a really great book. I recommend it for learning new cast on and bind offs. It's there's a great chart that matches cast ons and bind offs for look, for stretchiness, for tightness, whatever you're looking for. So it's a great resource. So I recommend that. And so I will show you how to do this. First, you start with a blunt needle. I recommend one that's a little bit kind of chubby because I found that when I was using one that had a little bit more of a point to it, I liked the bent tip, but it was just a little too sharp, and I found that I was piercing my yarn a little bit too much, so I had to redo a few stitches. And to begin, you need to cut your yarn, but it's different from the Elizabeth Zimmerman sewn bind off in technique and in the length of yarn that it is recommended. Elizabeth Zimmerman's is 3 times the length, but this one you need 4 times. So just keep in mind, if you are knitting a cowl, there's 2 sides to your cowl, so don't just do 1, 2, 3, 4. You have 8 lengths that you need to measure. So just keep in mind the length that you're actually cutting, because you don't need to run out of yarn. So I've got my needle threaded and ready to go. Pull my yarn to the front, and we're going to skip this first stitch to begin with. We go in through the second stitch, just like we're going to knit it. Pull it through so it wraps around the front here. And then from the back, like we're going to purl this first stitch, we pull the needle into the stitch and over this wrap here. And then we can pull this stitch off the needle. Show you again. Into the second stitch rather. From the back to the front, into the first stitch and over that wrap. So it crosses the wrap on the top. Now you can economize your movements, so you can do it all in one fell swoop. Into the second from the front. Oops, I didn't I didn't economize. Pull that off. I'll show you the economy way. So you put it in just like before, but only pull the needle out enough that you can turn it around and into that first one from the back and pull it off all at the same time, and then you can pull the yarn through just one time. So it's going to prevent some arm strain, as well as keep the yarn from getting frayed too much. I'll show you one more time how to economize that. So I pull the yarn through the second stitch here and through the back of the first one and through. Now this way, by pulling the yarn over the top of this wrap, is going to create a row of slants in this direction from lower left to top right. And this can get a little sloppy and loose, so maintaining the tension as you do each stitch is important. You can tighten them up as you go or loosen them up if you need to. But my tip is to take a look at your cast on, and the stitches should be about the same length as your cast on. If you know that your cast on edge is the right tension, then the stitches in your bind off should be the same length, and they should be good enough. So if you want your stitches to turn to slant in the opposite direction, there's a way to do that as well. And it's the same basic technique where we go across the front and into that second stitch as if to knit, and then through the back of the first one, but instead of going over the needle or over that stitch, we're going to go under this yarn. And then we can pull that off. And it's not apparent in that first stitch. Pull it off. In fact, it'll take a couple of stitches for it to show up since we've been doing the other direction. Oops. Go underneath that wrap. And off the needle. It's not really showing up quite yet. And you can economize with this technique too, with this other direction. Just a little bit harder to be sure that you get it underneath that loop. So, starting to show up a little bit. So we've got from upper left to lower right instead of lower left to upper right. And in between, when you switch directions, it ends up being a parallel stitch. And if you alternate every stitch across, then it kind of looks like a purl really, where you've got the upper bumps and the lower bumps, only it's like double time. So it's kind of a cool edging in itself. So you might keep that in mind for another project. So I recommend this slant where you go over the yarn. It's a little bit easier in a tiny way, and it matches the cast on very nicely. If I can get this out of the way. So there you have it. The sewn bind off, called the stem stitch sewn bind off. Thanks for watching, and keep your eye out for the Quixotic Cowl coming soon. Thanks.